Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and this week I want to talk to Mike and Mike about a slump. Sales is a thinking process, but what happens when you get in a slump and then that's all you think about? Mike and Mike, let's get started. What happens when you're in a slump?
Mike must have teed this one up because it's no secret. I am returning from vacation. I took the dream vacation with my wife about 2 weeks ago and spent a great time in Jamaica, had a blast, got back and was excited to come back, very relaxed, ready to go. But also have now discovered in this about 10 days or so that I've been back that I'm in that place. I'm in a rut right now. And props to you guys for setting me up on this one.
Yeah, Jody, it's funny that you say it. And there's so many times that we talk about sales in the context of stories. And those stories could be related to dating. The stories can be related to sports metaphors. And everybody goes through cycles. And I think one of the bigger challenges is not getting too deep into overthinking the cycle that you're currently in. I had someone who I worked with in the past, and I referred to her as Eli Manning. She was never got too up and never got too down. She just kind of even keel and move things forward. And by being able to do that, she was able to take the emotion out of overthinking, hey, how come I'm not getting a response? Or why is this deal not moving forward? Or what's not working? Is my email working? I mean, you go through those periods where you're like, okay, now I've got to send a test email to my work email just to confirm that email is being moved through. So
I literally did that yesterday.
That's awesome.
I was like, all right, it has to be an email problem here because people I'm waiting to hear back from, I think for me, it was a momentum buster, right? When I left, I had a lot of things teed up before the break started. And I knew that I was going to be checked out during that time. And I think I was really good about that, maybe too good at being completely checked out. But anyhow, my expectation coming back was that it would be like I never left and that it would be, okay, let's pick up the ball where we left off kind of thing. And that just didn't materialize. And so I think that's one of the things I've been feeling for the last week or so is like, wow, why did the momentum shift so much just because I was out for 8 or 9 days? And then I started thinking about it last night. And I think you just said something that resonated with me, which is it gets in your head and you start overthinking about where you're at in the cycle. And then I started thinking about things like, okay, it was just Labor Day weekend. It was a long holiday weekend. School's just starting for a lot of people. Maybe it's just a series of coincidences that people are busy. And that's why this momentum has been disrupted. And even if I hadn't gone on vacation, I would still start to see this little bit of a lull. So I guess maybe, and I'm summarizing it now saying, okay, next week better be better.
Yeah. So how do you fix it? And I could sit here and pop jokes at Mike and make comments like, hey, before you went on vacation, we talked about what are some of the things that need to move forward while you're gone. And it's, oh no, things are good. And the reality is there are always things that are going to happen throughout a sales cycle and throughout a process and throughout your engagement with customers that are outside of your control. And if you get back to the basics and be really clear on next steps and be really clear on validating those next steps with the customer, with the contact, with the prospect, many times that can be the thing that gets you out of the rut. It gets that momentum back. It's going back to basics, getting back to the fundamentals. In baseball, it's spending some time in the cages and batting practice.
Yeah, for me, it's just been about prioritizing things because I think what was happening to me was that I had so many things on my list that I wanted to get done. I thought, okay, I really need to stop thinking about it and prioritize the things that are really out there that are real, that need to be moved forward, that I know if I can just focus on one or two things and start to see some momentum, just kind of shaking out of being at the low point in the cycle, I guess. And in fact, it was interesting. Just before we got on this call, I had an email that came across that I've been waiting for the last 4 or 5 days. That came in and confirmed something that I've been waiting to hear results on. And it was the answer I was looking for and hoping for. So that just in itself was sort of a shot in the arm for my day, which then got me thinking, okay, snap out of it here. Been doing this long enough, particularly in sales, to know that, and I think you even mentioned it with somebody that you knew from past, Mike, that the great days really aren't that great and the bad days aren't so bad. Just keep an even keel and keep things moving forward. And so I think that's what snaps me out of the rut. And when I think back when I was in that job where I was making sales every day, making outreach, and having those weeks where I would do everything that I had planned on doing but didn't get the results, and how discouraging that could be. But knowing that you'd have to tell yourself, okay, that was one of those weeks that just didn't deliver the results I was hoping for. Next week's a new week, put it behind me and keep pushing forward the next week, and away you go.
I think the important thing here too is to not continue to get beat by the past. So if you stay in that rut, you stay in the mindset of why is this not happening? Where is this going? And I know this whole conversation is a bit too touchy-feely for me. But
we're hugging at the end of this, right?
We probably.
I just wish Jody was here. He could a little group hug.
My goal is to get you to cry. But,
that's going to be a stretch.
So if when you go back to it and you get back into the basics, it's kind of saying, first thing I need to do is I need to make contact, and I need to figure out what's changed, if anything's changed. And I got to be really careful about assuming that something's changed. So, for me, it's about re-engaging back with the people who you're talking with today, and making sure that re-engagement relates directly to something you've already talked about that's personal to them. So if it's related to an upcoming conference, if it's related to the school year because of the product that they're selling, if it's related to whatever, make it personal about them and be very clear on what the call to action is. Ask directly for them to confirm that they received the message, if that's the only commitment that you need to get. If it's about answering a question, be clear about feedback and when you need that feedback from. So you start to manage the customer or the prospect or the person you're working with in a way that helps drive that engagement and get that follow-up. If that doesn't work after the first time, then just give them some time. I mean, there's a trust that you usually build up with people that you're working with. They know you're out there. And the more you continue to push, the more desperate you become. And the reality is they can smell it and they can sense that. And they start adapting and changing their behavior on that. What we don't know in this situation, many unknowns, what we don't know is, Mike said, are they still on vacation coming back from a long weekend? Do they have kids that are going back to school? Are their kids going to school in a different state? Did something happen inside their personal life that all of a sudden has taken the priority over the things that you want to move forward? So just trust yourself. I think this really comes back to trusting yourself and your capabilities. You've been successful over a long period of time. Nothing's changed in that past 10 days. The rut is just a series of events that you go through, and now just work through it.
Yeah, and from a sales leadership perspective, the thing that you have to be careful too is that people read that. So when you're talking to people that you're, customers that you're trying to work with, or people that you're introducing yourself to for the first time, and you're making those initial impressions, along with the team that you work with every day, if you're in that bad place where your body language changes, your tone and inflection changes, people can tell when you're not on top of your game, so to speak. And that's one thing with us having a small team that we work with every day. Got to be careful about that, because one thing that can be really contagious is, oh, why is Mike in a bad place? What's going on? What should I be worried about? How does this going to affect me, kind of thing? And so being able to pull yourself out of it. So that's one of the things that actually motivates me, is to think, okay, what message am I sending people I'm talking to every day? What message am I sending the team that I work with every day? If I can't get pushed through it, that I know that just compounds itself across a team. And that's really the last thing you want to do, because then you've got to sort of not only get yourself out of a rut, but get your team out of a rut.
So that's awesome. So while the team sees that happening, then he and I go running into a meeting room to jump on a podcast to record where we're doing something productive. But everybody's like, why are Connor and Simmons bailing on us?
Yeah.
So with that, you have a small team that picks up on your body language and that your mood is different. When you're in a slump, is this something you should share with the team? How do you handle that with your team?
Yeah, we're pretty transparent about it. Our group is small enough, and we've worked together long enough and they know us well enough that they can read us pretty quickly. So doing anything other than being completely upfront and transparent would certainly just feed into that fear. And so Mike and I have always been very transparent, very open about what's going on with us personally, with the business, the projects that we're working on, things like that. Because without that, then people start to kind of fill in the blanks on their own. And the last thing you want to have is a team worried about filling in the blanks. And I can remember earlier in my career where I had a boss who every time his door closed, something big always happened. And it was amazing because every time his door closed, it would basically freeze the whole floor. And there was like 40 or 50 of us. So it would go from a flurry of activity to, Lee's door just closed. Something's going down. And the productivity would go to zero because we would all be wondering, hey, what's going on right now? Why is somebody in Lee's office? And now that I've been in Lee's position where I've been behind a closed door, where I've spent a half an hour just talking about how somebody's doing, and it really had nothing to do with how the team is performing. I always think about that I used to sit in that chair wondering what the heck's going on behind that closed door. And so we don't have a lot of closed doors around here. We have an open work area and glass windows everywhere. And so we try and be really, really open with things.
It's kind of interesting. So you talk about an experience where you see the trigger that happens as a person on the floor and Lee closes the door and something big's going to happen. What about when you see at the employee level? So you see a member of your team where you can just tell, look, I know they're doing the right things. I know historically they've done great in the role, but things just aren't coming together. And you could just kind of get that. You get that sense, you get that feeling based on the language, based on their engagement, that something's changed. How do you address that? What have you done in the past to help get people out of that rut?
Yeah, that's also really timely because we have a project we're working on right now. And the kickoff of the project, we really didn't see the results that we expected. We went back and looked at the product itself, some feedback that we received from initial customers, things like that. Long and the short of it is what we discovered over about a 45-day period was that there were definitely some things that needed to be enhanced in the product. And we had a team that kind of weathered through that, a sales team. And it's a small group, it's 4 people, but they weathered through those changes and those setbacks. And we're coming out of the development cycle now where product is ready to be relaunched. We've got mobile apps launching, all those things that the salespeople have been waiting for. And now we're going to be ready to go back to a lot of people that we'd made outreach to and talk about these changes. And I think what you highlight, Mike, is that period of time where we really couldn't put any more emphasis on the sales effort. They were doing what we asked them to do. We weren't getting the results. And we had to be careful about that because we could say, well, we just want you to make more dials. We just want you to make more outreach, more emails, do all these things that would satisfy activity metrics. But at the end of the day, we knew that just the rejection in itself from the market would drive that team further and further into a dark place. And so what we tried to do, and I think what we did successfully for the last, say, 30 days while we were in this development cycle was focusing on things that we could impact, focusing on things that we could do to prepare us for this product re-release. And that included things like building their network inside of organizations that we know at some point will be ready to communicate with, and focusing their time on learning more about the market. What products are out there that we know we're going to be competing with? And just really, it was more of a learning and education mode where they could actually improve their thinking and their knowledge of the market and their customers and things like that, instead of, well, I made 50 outreaches today and basically I got a hold of one person and they're not interested. So what we tried to do is really shift their focus to things that they could have a positive impact with, knowing that when we get ready to relaunch the product, that will just pay off in the form of being ready to hit the ground running as opposed to playing catch up now that the product's out.
I think the key there really was focusing on individual wins that were quick and kind of easy to get through. It's outreach that's less about product and more about an interest in understanding the market. As you work with people over time, you realize people like to share. They like to share experience. They like to help others. So being able to have those kind of conversations ended up elevating the mood and being able to have those kind of conversations elevated the mood that people were having because they were engaging with people that were other than the people that are in the circle that they work with. So, for me, again, going back to the baseball thing, this is about just getting on base, whether it's a bunt or getting a nice single out there. That shows you that I didn't play baseball. But it's quick, easy ways to get on base. Let's just start getting back to a point where you feel like the momentum is moving. I know Mike knows the story. Back in January or earlier this year, I was out on a fire road in Prescott with my Jeep and my family, and I'm wearing a pair of shorts and a tennis shoes, and there's probably 1.5 feet worth of snow, and I've got my Jeep built up pretty well, so I'm thinking I'm in good shape. About
and every local guy's like, oh, this dude's from Scottsdale.
About 15 minutes, about 15, 20 minutes down the trail, a couple of kids are sledding down the hill. I move over to the side to let them go, not realizing that there's a ditch on the side of the road, which usually happens on those kind of roads, and dropped right in the ditch and couldn't get out. And so now I'm stuck in a ditch. I've got a Jeep that's built up to a point where it should not be stuck anywhere. And I'm the Yahoo from down south in Arizona that is not from the mountains, not dressed up in my camo gear, wearing a pair of shorts. And fortunately, I had shoes on. I wasn't wearing my flip-flops. But that turned into a process where people on this road watching on both sides. I've got people behind me. I've got people in front of me. The stress level's going up. I forgot that I should have aired down the tires. I should have put my lockers on. I should have gone back to the basics. Instead,
you actually should have stayed on the road.
I should have stayed on the road originally, but because I got into the ditch, I had to figure out how to get out of it. And ultimately, they were able to hook the winch up to a tree and pull out, but it should not have been as bad as it was. And so the point of that story really is even these ruts that you go through aren't as bad as you think they are. It's more than likely it's you getting into your own head, identifying the challenges that you're running into rather than outwardly and actively seeking the positive things that are happening inside that environment. So focus on success as a way to get out of these ruts, and this too shall pass.
So I can picture your wife as you're using that story. I can picture Jen sitting in the Jeep as your sales manager, quote unquote, giving you coaching about how brilliant that move was. And so was she the supportive coach that was helping you buckle down and get out of the ditch, or was she giving you direct feedback about what got you into the ditch? Or this is
it was
it's like backing up a boat.
It was
worse in a marriage that just
it was worse than that. When I was out trying to operate the winch and asked her to drive, her response was, "I'm not driving this thing." So anyhow, fortunately, she won't listen to the podcast, or if she does, that'll come back and haunt me. But the reality was, I had some dude in camo get in the driver's seat and drive the Jeep while I was operating the winch, getting out there. But so be prepared. Know that you have tools. I may have been out there in shorts and a windbreaker and a pair of tennis shoes, but I had my winch power cable. Fortunately, I had my tree saver. I had the gear that I needed to get out of that situation. Should never have gotten into it to begin with, but we all find ourselves in ruts every once in a while.
I don't feel so bad now.
So
coming into the call, I thought, I'm kind of in a little bit of a lull right now, and I need to snap out of it. But now that I've thought about that, thank you. Was that misery loves company, or has it been long enough to laugh about it now?
I think you're at the point where you should say, Mike, you complete me.
Yeah, I need a guy with a truck and a chain. That's all I need. I don't need tree savers. And all right, we've digressed.
Well, we know that this cycles, and you have great times, and then you have times when you're down in a rut. Mike, you mentioned being prepared. Is there, knowing that this is going to happen eventually, whether you have a downtime once a quarter, once a year, is there anything you can do to prepare for it?
I think the best thing you can do to prepare for it is trust your process. Most of us are using some kind of CRM. There should be some kind of sales process embedded in it. Go back into the process and just say, am I doing these things? Have I properly validated each of these opportunities that I'm working on? Have I properly qualified each of these opportunities that I'm working on? Are there areas of the process that I missed? And might that be creating the delay? So these become those checkbox things where I can go through and say, yep, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And it becomes a great way to reset your perspective on where you are.
Yeah, because that's the thing about sales is it's not a hit or miss thing every day that you're going to have all of these ups and downs. Generally speaking, what you're doing really every day is moving things forward. And that can be multiple projects. It can be multiple client engagements and things like that. And I think you're right. What you have to do is focus on the bigger picture of all of the things that you're doing. And if you validate that you're doing the right things, just trust in the fact that you've had positive results from the things that you focused on before. If in the review of kind of where you're at in your pipeline of activity, if you're seeing that, well, maybe you did let off the gas here and you're not doing some of those basics, it's about just getting back to those, the blocking and tackling, I guess, is one of your sports analogy.
I get that much better than I do baseball.
Yeah. So blocking and tackling and
Thank you.
doing the right things. And you do see that if you stick with it, eventually you'll see those good days. The other thing I've done too is it's a lot easier to focus on when you're in a rut and thinking, how am I going to get out of it? But you also have to take time, I think. And one of the things I try and do is when I feel like I'm on top of things too, where I've had that day where it's like, oh my gosh, if we could just do this every day, we would be lights out and everything would be perfect. And I try and catch myself on those days too and say, there was a lot of days that were a struggle that got me here. And just remember that while you're on top, that you're not going to necessarily have that day every day, and just appreciate that it's one of the peaks as opposed to one of the valleys. And that if you just keep moving forward, because I think a lot of times when things are going really, really well is when you take your eye off the ball as well, thinking that, everything's in control. And maybe that's where I was at before I left for Jamaica, was I really felt like so many things were just really teed up and really rolling with a lot of momentum where, and I think you said this, Mike, when you asked me before I left, hey, what do you need me to keep rolling while you're gone? And I said, hey, everything's in good shape and nothing needs to be really tended to. You've got to think about that as well.
So we've asked a couple of times for people for feedback. It'd be great to hear from those who are listening to this, how you get out of a rut, what your process is. So thank you in advance for sharing that.
Yes, if you have any systems or processes or tips that you use when you're in a rut, because we all go through it, if you have something that is effective for you, please do let us know, because this is a problem that we all face. Mike, do you have any closing thoughts or words of encouragement about being in a slump?
I would just end with, this too shall pass. Nobody has been in a slump forever, at least not that I know of. I guess some putters get the yips and they go for a long time, but this too shall pass.
Mike, well, thank you. This was a great episode, and you two were very honest about being in a slump and how you deal with it, and I do appreciate that. That makes for a great talk. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast. You can find out more at catalystsale.com or follow us on Twitter at Catalyst Sale.